would like you first to, thank you, Heidi.
Yep.
I would like you first to say hi in the chat, say your name and where you're from so we can get a sense of where everybody's at. I'm Zach, I'm from Brooklyn. I'm originally from North Carolina though. Hi Clayton, neighbor. Welcome. So today we have a very special guest as folks are signing in with us, Latifah Saafir. As the guest of honor, she will be presenting last. So you gotta hang around to hear the good things she has to say. I'll be talking about this 2021 banner that you probably saw me post on Instagram. Heidi's giving us a tour of her workspace studio. And Luke, you're doing what exactly?
Who knows? No, I'm just kidding. I did a project exactly 1 year ago called Joy Quilt. So it seemed pertinent to go through that project. So
I dig it. I dig it. And at the end, you will have time. We'll do some Q&A. So if there's anything you want to go deeper on with anything the four of us have shared, you're welcome to do that. But first, we have a little game we'd like to play. Last time, if you remember, we played Pictionary and some folks won some prizes. We're going to do something very similar today. We're going to play 20 questions. And we're going to ask for a volunteer from the audience. So be thinking if that person's going to be you, because here's how it works. You think of an object, right? 20 questions. The four of us, the panel, are going to try to guess what you're thinking of, asking you only yes or no questions. We have 20 attempts to guess what you're thinking of. If we guess, you win a prize. Heidi, you want to tell them what the prize is?
So even if you don't guess, just for being the 20 questions person, you will win a copy of my vignettes quilt pattern. We're about to do a quilt along next month in September. So you win a copy of the pattern. If we don't guess, then you'll get 2 patterns from me, and from Latifah, you're gonna get
a pattern and a clammy template.
yeah.
So the stakes are high. Are there volunteers out there who have already thought of something interesting? Just raise your little digital hand, that little yellow hand.
Ooh, Lisa went up first. I will say I saw that one go zoom.
Yep.
I'm with you. Okay, Lisa, and if we have time, Charlotte, you're up next. All right, I see you.
Okay.
So Lisa, let's make you big. Can we make our co-host?
No. Hi, Lisa.
Lisa Barnes, where are you from?
Alpine, Wyoming.
Okay, and how long you been quilting?
Oh, I started 30 years ago, took a break for 20 to raise a kid, and then came back. So I'm recently back.
Welcome back.
Right.
Don't take breaks. If you have a kid, don't take breaks. I regret.
Glad you made it back though.
Thank you.
So Lisa, do you have a secret object in mind?
Yes, I do.
Okay. I'm gonna ask the first question, and then we'll just do our order of presentation. How about that? Then Heidi.
I like it. I like it.
Okay, question number 1 for Lisa. Is it living?
No.
Okay, question number 2. Is it small enough that you could hold it in the palm of your hand?
Oh my God, you guys have good questions. Yes.
Is it quilt related?
Oh, yes, of course.
Latifah?
Is it something you use on your sewing machine?
No.
Yeah. Okay. That's 4.
Is it hard, Lisa? As opposed to small?
It could be either.
Oh.
What a stumper.
All right. Lisa, is there any metal in it?
Could have metal. Doesn't have to have metal. I think you guys know already.
Oh, I think maybe I do know now.
Go for it, Heidi. Give us a guess.
It's not my turn, right? Should I?
I don't know. Is it a ruler?
All right. I'm choosing it's allowed. Is it a thimble?
Oh, too easy.
But Lisa, for playing the game, you still won one of Heidi's vignette patterns. So congratulations.
Yay.
That was fun. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Appreciate you stepping up. Folks, I think we got time for a second round.
Do it. Number 2, Charlotte.
Charlotte. Heidi, do your best again.
So
Make
yes,
Charlotte.
I'm gonna remove the spotlight, and now Charlotte, we're gonna add spotlight. Okay.
So, hi.
Hello.
Hi, Charlotte.
You're welcome. You got your thing in mind.
Of course.
First, Charlotte, little chit chat. Where are you
Yeah.
from and how long you been quilting? I mean, I know, but not
You know, Germany, quilting for a year now, but sewing for years.
And what's your favorite part of quilting?
Having an excuse to get more fabric into my flat because I don't keep a lot of things, and now I start having stacks again, and that's really nice.
Nice having that material on hand, isn't it?
Watch out though, it gets really the stacks get deep very fast. I've heard.
I know.
I don't know, but I've heard that.
Yeah, I know. But
Okay. So Charlotte, you've got your secret object in mind, right?
yes, I have.
Okay. Heidi, since you last guessed, we'll let Luke start with the first question.
Is it sewing related?
No.
Ooh.
Is it? I don't have a good question. Can I do a pass and come back? Zach, can you have a question?
Yeah. So it's not sewing related. Is it living?
No.
Can you hold it in the palm of your hand?
Yes, you can.
Okay.
I guess it's my turn again, right? Since I passed.
Yeah.
Is it metal?
Yes.
Ooh.
Well, that changes my question. I was going to ask if it's edible, but that already answered it. So
I wouldn't suggest it.
well, no, let's see. It's metal, not sewing related, can fit in your hand. Oh my gosh. Is it wearable? Decorative?
No.
Latifah, you got another one? We'll zoom back to you.
Okay. Can you buy things with it?
No.
No. I always make.
Do people tend to buy or have multiples of these things?
I wouldn't say so.
This is good.
Okay. So it's not sewing related, but is it like somehow under the umbrella of quilting?
No.
Not at all.
But it is a normal object you see from time to time.
So folks maybe only have one usually. It fits in your hand.
Metal.
Metal. Gosh, only one usually. I wonder, is it very valuable?
Ooh.
No.
Is it fits in your hand? That's the thing that's stumping me now. Is it something you use for self-care?
You can, but I mean, you depends.
Okay.
I wouldn't say necessarily, but yeah, it can.
Oh
Okay.
boy, that changes everything too. I'm feeling very stumped. Okay.
Do you, Charlotte, do you plug it in?
No.
Ugh.
Mary from the chat asked the
Oh.
question that I was thinking, but I don't think if you can't plug it in, it's not that, Mary.
Okay. Is it a tool?
Yes.
Okay. Has a job. It gets the job done.
Yes.
Self-care.
When are we done with 20 questions?
We're on
I have
question.
a tally. I got 9 so far. Is that where you guys are too?
Keep going. Tool, not plug. Is it? Gosh, is it a screwdriver?
Mm-mm.
We said it's not a tool.
No,
Or
it
not
is a tool.
Oh,
It
it
is
is
a
a tool.
It is
It's a metal tool that fits in your hand that doesn't cost a lot of money, but it doesn't have anything to do with quilting or sewing.
And you only have
It's
one.
like
although
I wanted to
screwdrivers,
ask
I
if
have
there was a
seven.
scissors, but you use a scissors to quilt, so it can't be that.
Latifah,
So
what girl? You got us. You got
a tool. It's not a screwdriver though.
Is it a wrench?
It can be, I have to say, it can be quilting related, but it is nothing that is directly included when you quilt.
Is it a wrench?
I don't know what that is. I'm German.
like a spanner, like a you know.
No. Mm-mm.
Okay, I feel like maybe I should ask mine, even though I'd be cutting in front of you, Zach.
Is it food or drink related?
No.
Heidi, what you got?
Okay. Is it a scissors?
No, it's not scissors.
Not a scissors. Okay.
Okay, it is a tool, not scissors, not a wrench, not a screwdriver, fits in your hand. You only have one.
It's only kind of self-care. So like it's probably not a tweezers because it's only kind of for self.
No, it's not tweezers. No, not something that is like that directly self-care. No.
You just asked scissors. Have we asked about whether it opens wine bottles? Because that's sometimes quilt related.
True, but no, it's not. Very self-care.
And that is fully in self-care.
That's absolutely self-care. I agree.
Yeah, I feel like and a nail clipper would be self-care too. I like Susan's question.
I didn't see Susan's question.
Oh, and I think I asked that already. Do most people own this object?
Yes.
But only one. That's the part that kind of.
No.
What question are we on? We're getting
only
close.
one.
Is
You
this?
can have several, but you use
okay.
only one.
Is it something you use to open doors?
No, it's not a key.
I think we got one more round, folks.
Okay,
Yeah, Heidi,
we're on our
I think
last
good.
4 questions. All right. Is it metal in your hand? Nothing to do with sewing. It's not a key.
Doesn't open doors.
Oh my God! If anyone else wants to go before me.
Charlotte, looks like you're taking home the grand prize. I mean, not to speak too early, but you got us good.
Ready to go pack up the clammy and the pattern now?
I like that question. Do you use it indoors or outdoors?
Both.
Well, that's not yes or no.
So
Do you use it exclusively outdoors?
No. You can take it with you. You use it from time to time. You can lose it in your purse. Something very everyday. It is metal in this
Charlotte,
case.
I thought you wanted the prizes. Why are you
Okay,
giving it away?
I got one. This is my last question. Is it a
Is
Swiss
it
Army knife?
Sorry?
Is it a Swiss Army knife? Like a utility
No,
knife?
it's not a knife. Mm-mm.
Like a multi-use tool like that. Okay.
Mm-mm.
All right.
Super simple.
We just have Latifah and Zach and Luke. You guys both have one question left and that's it, right?
I'll go. Is it a cell phone?
No.
That's valuable.
Latifah,
valuable.
last question.
Last question. I'm looking through my purse mentally right now.
Some have it in their purse. Not everyone does. But sometimes you ask for it.
I have no idea now. I'm completely stumped, and it's metal. Is
this
it
case,
is it always metal?
No.
Oh, maybe Susan has it. Do you have Susan's guess right there, Latifah?
Give it an ask.
Yeah.
Zach has the last question, right?
No,
Mickey,
Zach.
Mickey says it too.
Zach, what do you think? You're our ringer, buddy. Zach, come in with the guess. What you got?
We need a drum roll.
Last and final guess. I'm gonna say, is it a pin, Charlotte?
Yes, it is a pen.
Oh, I love that.
Oh my goodness. Thank you to the hive mind.
I think Charlotte deserves the grand prize, and the reason why she
does
not have got it without the chat.
That's right.
No way we would have gotten it without the chat.
Yeah,
Charlotte, you have us sweating over here.
I was so nervous. I felt like this is so easy. I'm so sorry.
I think you guys need to warn the next guests that they may have to put in a little work when they're on the call.
Well, Charlotte, thank you so much for stepping up and volunteering and playing our game of 20 questions. After the call, connect with Heidi and Latifah so you can get your grand prize.
Yeah, send us an email. All right.
Yeah, and Lisa, also send Heidi an email so you can get your pattern. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Let's go ahead and, I was going to say start the show, but it feels like we're deep into it already.
Okay.
The idea of Soft Folk Summer Camp is that it's a laid back, more casual conversation. I do have some pictures to show just because they relate to what I'm working on now. So I'd like to go ahead and pop those up on the screen. I would say that for the last 3 years, I have been making annual banners as a way of setting an intention for the year to come. So, you know, a lot of people do resolutions. I kind of like the idea of like, what intention do I want to set? What direction do I want to move towards? And about 3 years ago, I took a pretty deep dive into the Asafo flags from the Fante people of Ghana, and I love the look. So if you're not familiar with this craft, this art, let me show it to you, and then I'll show my own work because it comes a lot from that. Okay, 1 second. Okay, so first, a few Asafo flags. People in the art and craft world tend to call these Asafo flags. If you're Fanti and you live in Ghana, you call them Franca. So just to put that word out there, they have a history of a couple hundred years long. They tend to be flags that are carried into battle or commemorate a battle. And you can see these images here have some warlike appearances to them. You see soldiers, stars, trees. You also see flags in the top left corners, and you see a strong border oftentimes. Here you see one that's a little more symbolic with a 3-headed dragon and the British flag, which was the colonizer of Ghana. And then in the bottom, I'm not sure the story behind this particular one, but you see something more modern, the train with the Union Jack in the upper right-hand corner. And I love so many things about these flags. One is that they're traditionally sewn by men, which as a queer kid growing up in a conservative community, that rang very cool to me. I don't know what it's like to grow up in a colonized land, so I don't know what that struggle is like, but I appreciate how these flags capture the victory and capture the celebration for the Fante people as they're making these flags, as they're sharing it with their community. So I'm kind of thinking what that looks like to me when I'm looking forward to a new year. What righteous struggle am I going to engage in on a personal level to come out better at the other end of this year? So I've laid for you the cultural context of where I'm coming from, the philosophical underpinning, and here's some of the flags that I've made. This is the first one, 2019. You can see the similarities easily, I'm sure, with the border, the applique shapes, and things like that. That year, I was like, I need more nature, I need more different things. I'll show you 2020, because this one was up on my wall for a year and a half, because 2021 came and almost went without me getting this banner that you see behind me done. That year, when I was making it, that would have been December 2019, felt like a very different time and a place, and we'll circle back to that in just a second. But one of the symbols that really rang true to me was this idea of the magician, which comes from the tarot deck. The idea of someone who can look up into heaven, look up into the divine, look into the ideal, and then recreate that world here on earth on a terrestrial level. So I like that quite a bit. My partner often jokes that what I thought were magical sparks floating through the air, he says I invoked the coronavirus in 2020. So.
Oh boy, I think they're just Eat-Its. I wouldn't put that on you.
Yeah, I don't know.
Question about the size of them, and I would say they're about like 1.5 feet tall. Does that?
Yeah,
because you can see the one sitting behind Zach for scale compared to Spot. Yeah, and that one.
And it really is fabric dependent. So like this is a scrap of canvas. I always sew on canvas. So it just depends on what scrap of canvas I have. Mm-hmm. You know, they do tend to be about the same size.
Yeah.
Okay. So that was last year. It hung on my wall. If you saw the picture on Instagram, it hangs above my altar of special things in my bedroom as just a visual cue every day. It's actually at the foot of my bed. So when I wake up in the morning, I'm like, okay, this is my direction. This is a struggle. This is what I'm working. This is the good fight. This is what I'm working for.
Wait, Zach, I got a question. What's that? Is it a letter P on the coin in this one?
Okay, so that's actually a runic symbol from the ruins.
Oh, okay.
That what looks like a P is actually called Wunjo, and it's a symbol for joy.
Oh.
So nice segue to Luke's joy quilts here in a little bit. I was just wanting to make sure to fight to maintain an element of joy in every day, right?
Beautiful.
It wasn't, at the beginning of 2020, it wasn't nearly as prevalent as it is now.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, and so then rewind 3 weeks. I'm getting ready to go on this road trip to go visit family in Montana. Uncle Jim passed away, and then you might have seen that post where he had so many silk scarves that we had a table in the church where people could take a silk scarf with them as a memory of Jim. So I'm wearing mine today. And I knew I was gonna be on the road, and I love a good hand sewing project while I'm traveling. Just, you don't need that much. And so I started thinking about what do we do with 2021? I mean, folks, don't even tell you it's crazy times. I started with, actually I have it right here. I started with this old Boro garment that somebody gifted to me, a Japanese Boro garment that's 100, 150 years old, more than likely. And I didn't want to just hack in. First of all, I should say there was no mending it. It was so torn and ripped up. There was just no mending of it.
You should tell everyone who maybe not know what Boro, kind of what that, explain a little bit about that process so they know kind of how precious the garment is in the process.
Thank you, Luke, for sure. So what you see here, I'll hold it up so you can get a closer idea. Oftentimes, fabric being as scarce as it was back in the day, because people often wove it at home in rural Japan. When you made a garment, you might make a single lightweight layer to wear to keep you warm in the springtime. But then as things would wear and they get holes in them, they would just patch them up over time. And these became generational garments that would get passed down from parents to children. And also what's cool is as you add the patches, then of course it becomes a warmer and warmer garment. So they can increase in functionality and not just beauty as time goes on. But let's not be careful to romanticize it, because I'm sure these, folks were doing this out of necessity, right? They weren't doing it just because it was cute. But there is something, when I look at this, I didn't want to just hack it up and use it. I wanted to be respectful with the way I came at this Boro garment. And so what I did, I got my well, not my seam ripper, but my little awl, that I can pop in there and just deconstruct this garment patch by patch. So I got a lot of pieces. Some of them are perfectly usable, right? Like this, for example. Perfectly usable piece of fabric that one could patch with. But some of them were really tattered, right? And it was the tattered ones that I actually started with when it came for designing this banner, because I wanted to just see what shapes would show up in this banner. And so I took the most tattered, and as you can see, I laid them out on the ground in front of me when I was at home, sitting with my 105-year-old grandma on the porch. Latifah, we were talking about that beforehand. And I started seeing this landscape emerge. And then the more I played with it, the little bridge that you see in the middle was really just a few threads, less than this right here, just a few threads. And I'm like, that's it. That's the idea. That for me, for all of us to some degree, but since this is a personal banner, I'll talk about myself. This is a bridge year, right? I got 1 foot in one world and 1 foot in another. I've got 1 foot of 18 years of teaching high school, and I'm moving full-time textiles. And I like the way that this landmass bridge, this natural bridge, captures that. You can see also that same kind of roughness and unpolishedness mirrored in the border. I often trim the little corners off the triangles, but 2021 being what it is, I wanted to leave it rough. I also was very inspired by one of the members of one of my creative cohorts who made a Frida Kahlo portrait out of bias tape for one of our projects. And I was like, oh, bias tape. I usually do hand appliqued numbers for the year. But what I like about working with bias tape is that it's super responsive, which we've all had to be in the last year, right? So I can take that too, and because the fabric is at an angle, strips of fabric cut at an angle, you can get curves and you get sharp lines out of it that you can't get if you cut with the grain of the fabric. So that's where the bias tape comes in, the 2021. You see the one dangling off the bottom because who knows where all this is going to end up? We don't know, but it feels very open-ended to many of us. And I think that one kind of taps into that. I also use bias binding for the the camel colored repeating echoing lines that you see. That for me, one phrase I thought of a lot this year is that I have felt very fortunate as I've moved towards full-time textiles to feel like the things are lining up, right, for me to do that. And the visual that I have of that is that the warm wind of the universe is at my back. And that's a beautiful thing to feel. I hope we all feel that way when we're pursuing our passions. And so those camel repeating echoing lines feel to me like the warm wind of the universe blowing me forward, blowing me across that bridge, which is a little scary. And it's going to be a little bit hard to get over that first hump. But once you're there, once I'm there, it's higher ground. It's clear view for miles, you know. One last thing I'll say, and then I'll be glad to take any questions or comments that you might like, or we can save them for the end, whatever folks want to do. But it's interesting to compare them all together. 2021 definitely has a different vibe, a little darker or more muted, maybe is a better way to say that. I think that's fair. And then a couple of detail shots for you to see how I sew it all together. The black thread that you see is reclaimed thread from denim jeans. I did a project this year, and Heidi, you were there for it with me. Yeah, it's blind stitching or stitching without looking. And so I stitched the word bridge once I saw what was happening into this canvas, just to remind myself that that was a cool moment from earlier in the year. There you can get a really good sense of the condition of the fabric. And I believe there's this last one.
Mm.
Oh, and one more. Yeah, as a note not to romanticize, I didn't really put these in any particular order. Maybe I shouldn't end on this note, but when I was opening up the seams of this jacket, I saw these little metallic flakes in the seams. I'm like, what are these? I posted on Instagram asking folks if they knew what it was, because I thought maybe they're seeds of some kind. And a few folks who sound like they know what they're talking about said, we think it's lice. And so I think living in the countryside and living in the situations they were, it probably was lice 100 years ago. I'm happy to report I have no lice at the moment. So no living lice were hopped from the garment to my home in the making of this. But that's it. That's my 2021 banner. It's both the year and the banner, they are what they are. That's all we got to work with. So I guess I'll leave it at that.
Oh, wow. That's so interesting. Thank you, Zach.
Mm-hmm. If anybody wants to chat more about it, you know where to find me.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, Heidi, take us on a little trip, would you?
All right. I'm going to mute for a second. If Zach, maybe you could highlight my phone while I change my sound over.
I'm looking for you, Heidi.
Oh, I think I see me.
Okay.
Replace spotlight. There we go. Hello, everyone. Okay. Going to turn around. So here's your little view of where I am. And this is both the living room and my 2-bedroom duplex that I live in, and the main place where I do work and actual sewing. So thank you, Christine. So this couch, I moved into this home in 2015, and I made this couch with my dad. So we got some elm wood from the lumberyard, and we had to use the planer and everything. And he was in charge of table saw stuff like this. And I had already learned how to turn things on the lathe. So like I turned this leg, and it's my design. So I recently restuffed the couch. It's a little bit puffier and better stuffed now than it was back when we first made it. It's a good segue into my quilt rack. It is a wonderful memory with him. And it was such a nice thing after he passed away in 2018 to be able to still see so many things that we made together. So this, we made with the same wood at the same time. This is my quilt rack, also made out of elm. Got a lot of quilts on here, including this very recently finished quilt. So that's part of how I store everything. And the wood has been sealed with varnish so that acid in the wood isn't directly touching anything. Here I have my pretty new ironing board. This was my Christmas present from my sweetheart. And then behind it is where I do a lot of my quilting. So you can see I've got a chair right here. That's so I can rest my feet on the chair so that my knees aren't bent the whole time that I'm quilting. And this is a quilt that I posted about a lot on Instagram recently. I basted it with some blue fabric underneath so you can see the seams real well. And I've quilted about a foot across. I like sitting in this big armchair. My mom had that reupholstered back in the 80s and I still like how it looks. Here is my day quilt that I made when I visited Zach. So we took a visit to the Tatter Blue Library and they gave us some of this fabric, and this string is from Zach. He dyed that. So it's found a nice place for it resting on my lamp over here. This is a painting that I made years ago. I was really interested in aerial views. So that's of Paris, which I think is part of why I got interested in my night flight quilts and looking at the earth from above. I also have a lot of pottery in here. That was my first creative love. So here I was always pressing textiles into my pottery. And that's part of what made me realize I should start taking textiles quilts. Here I've got, maybe I should have a more sacred place to put this, but these are my photos of all the quilts that I finished so far this year, which is nice to have on record. Bookcase where I try to store things. These are for a very current project where I'm making vases and I'm using all these little scraps from when I trim around the edge of a quilt. So my batting scraps, some fabric scraps. I like doing a lot of work on my quilt, on my couch also. I feel like it's really good for me to sit in different kinds of places. So this is right now how I've got some scraps and things set up. I'm making a lot of these quilted vases lately. I love this sweet little one. It's a honey jar inside of there. So I'll sit here and I'll have my little pins and needles and things. Easy to access. Across from me, when I look out the window, I love seeing all these green trees, especially this time of year. This is a cedar chest that my mom always had. And so I have some quilts that I store in here, my little 6x6 inch quilts, as well as lots of fabric. Yeah, the vases are glass inside. So lots of fabric scraps that I've been trying to plow through and especially use them in the vases. I find that using these little teensy bits inspired me to make choices that maybe I wouldn't make if I was cutting into yardage. And, you know, team, feel free to chime in with any questions if they come up. For a while, I was storing a lot of stuff on the floor, and then I invested in these baskets. Like I could have made my own basket. I didn't have time. I wanted to just get some cleaning done. So I bought these baskets, and now different things that are in progress or over here are no longer sitting on the floor. I've got this little filing cabinet thing. So it's a nice place for my rotary cutter, tape measure type stuff. Slid behind here is where I keep my cutting board and my clear plastic ruler. I have things like quilt pattern stuff goes in one drawer. My pens and stapler go in there. Here's my secretary, and I keep looks like my tax information in there. I have this nice big calendar where I look at like, when am I teaching and when am I having other things going on in the schedule so I don't overcommit myself. I have some personal life sewing projects going on over here. I've got some more foam left from when I stuffed the couch, and I just want to make like a nice pillow, like a big body pillow thing. I just haven't sewn that yet. This is my sewing machine that I'm using the most lately. It's an old Singer that was gifted to me from a local painter named Pamela Anderson. She's just a good friend of mine. And so I've been using her sewing machine lately. This, before I had my whole Zoom set up, this table was perpendicular to the wall, but now it's kind of nice to not have to take things down. So I have sewing on one side and computer on the other side. These really nice lamps that help me light things up when I'm taking photos. And then this is kind of a new area in the house. I've not shared much about this, but I got myself a massage chair. And this is so nice to like sit and relax and have a quiet moment and know I'm resting. I think it's maybe an issue that comes up for me when I have a home office, is it can be hard to know for sure, when am I working, when am I not working? And my work is so physical that it's been really fun. I used my, what's it called? My stimulus check to get that. And then, yeah, this acupuncture cushion down here, it's nice just to rest my feet on that. Like when we were on our Zoom just now, and my feet resting on here, and it's real nice for my feet. Okay. So the other space where I have stuff is in the second bedroom, which I originally thought was going to be where all the quilting would happen, but turns out takes a lot of space. So this is my second bedroom, and I store a lot of fabric in here. So I've been slowly trying to take my time reorganizing. So this box is all the fabric that hasn't yet been put on these shelves. But I think it's going to be really beautiful. It's certainly almost there. Where I wrap these around comic book boards. And so I can see all the fabric that I have. It's helping me realize I don't need to buy so much fabric. And like, I have a better memory then of what I have and how to make the most of what I've got. My main source of fabric though is not buying. It's when people give things to me. So like, these are all bins filled with things from a local guild member who passed away a few years. And that's my very small portion that I took from her stash. And I've got 3 big bags of fabric in here that I recently got for $40 at the rummage at the Quilt Museum in Cedarburg. And it's, cool vintage things that I couldn't pass up. I used to have a design wall here and I realized I wasn't using it. So now it's a place where I can hang a finished quilt and take a photo of myself with it or do things. I have a lot of fitness stuff in this room too. So this is my feet up where I like to do headstands. And then I just got this teeny tiny treadmill that I really love. It's like 3 feet, but it's fun to be able to do sewing or computer work while I'm walking. And not a ton of sewing, but I've attempted to sew. So I put my computer on here though, and I get a little computer work done and I walk, or I just watch a TV show and I don't sew and I walk. And quilting requires so much sitting still that it's really nice for me to get some movement in. And then over here, I've got the case for the sewing machine that I'm using. And then this sewing machine is one that I inherited from my dad that is good, but I'm using the one from Pamela right now. I have other finished stored stuff and projectors and a kitchen item. And I'm still in the process of kind of overhauling and cleaning things. This closet is the next thing that I want to rip everything out and put it back together. But that's where I keep my batting, quilt books, thread things, my camera for taking nice photos. A little more fabric is shoved in there too. My grandma used to do a lot of beading, so all of her beading things are up in there. It's where I keep my yardage that I buy, like my white cotton. And that really is the tour. Those are the areas in the house where I do sewing. So I'd be happy to answer any questions, or if there's a certain type of thing that you're curious about that I can show a little more in depth. No, she didn't my grandma didn't bead undress as much. She was more into making necklaces and jewelry. So it's that type of beading stuff. Oh, the fabric on my sofa. I got that at the discount textile outlet in Chicago. By chance, they're both from Waverly. I didn't realize that till I had them both at home. So they're both the same brand. I got them for $6 a yard. And it's just really a great, it's a great place in Chicago. If you go to Chicago, go to the Pilsen neighborhood, make sure it's not a Jewish holiday, like call ahead. I've made the trek to the discount textile outlet a few times and they've been closed. So be careful about their hours, but it's an amazing, amazing place. And then Zach, could you, I don't see it anymore. What was that last question about a recent quilt?
Yeah, so, and just keep an eye on the time too. I see we're running a little laggy, but excuse me. A helicopter went over and I got something stuck in my throat at the same time. But Jane would like to know a little bit about the quilt that you just finished on the rack.
Yes. So I need to take some nice photos of that and post and celebrate that I finished it. But it's one that I started in January of 2020, and it was intended to be a sample and to help in advertising with a class that I was going to teach in France with Les Sawyers Anglais, and Edie Yuri was going to be teaching natural dyeing during the day, and I was going to teach quilting and applique in the evening, and we were going to go like to the vintage antique market and stuff. So I was thinking, what will we have access to? What will make sense to sew while we're traveling? And Edie mailed me a bunch of naturally dyed fabrics. And then I went through my stash and found like some lace and some lace trim and other things that I envisioned us maybe finding that type of thing in France. And then ultimately we had to postpone and then cancel. Maybe one day we'll be able to reattempt that plan, but we have no idea when that would be. But I am going to teach a class that's kind of similar to this in Santa Fe, New Mexico in April, where we're all going to go to Santa Fe and we're going to make a travel quilt together. We won't be doing any natural dyeing, but we will have some special places to find fabric while we're traveling. And that's with Madeline Island School of the Arts. And yeah, so there's a lot of tails on here. And I really like the way that they create this visual punctuation for the quilt. Sometimes I have little bits of text that I hide into things. So here it says, "We've never met, but I've been an admirer." And that's how the email inviting me to teach in France began. And it was just such a nice thing to remember. So, but yeah, with an eye to the time, I think we can toggle over to Luke.
And then
that's a little.
And then at the end, when we have Q&A, Sandra would like to know more about your upcoming Quilt Along.
Oh, excellent. I would love to share about that. Okay, so let's highlight Luke. Here we go.
All right, make sure I'm unmuted. I think I am. Ba-ba-da-bum. We'll go to share screen. We'll go to Keynote. And it
Keynote.
Oh boy, don't, you know what?
Oh my God. Look.
Well, look, see, it's the thing on look, it's the Mac thing. I don't know, man. We don't have PowerPoint. What am I supposed to use? Here.
Slides. Google Slides.
Oh, Google Slides. Yeah, well, whatever. Look, you're just in touch with the young people there, Zach. I have no idea. I'm over here. I'm just gonna make poster boards and hold them up next time, and just like, you know, drop one at a time. As you know, I think that'll be easier than all this technology fangled stuff. outside of my archaic use of technology, I want to talk about my the series that I made 1 year ago called Joy Quilts. This was deep, what we thought was deep pandemic, which turns out to be just the crust of the bread of the pandemic loaf. And so we decided that what people needed in their life was a bit of joy. And by we, I mean me and the wife, my wonderful wife, Nicole. This was our first and only collaboration so far. There's her taking pictures of it with me in the studio. So the idea being, these quilts are just joyful. That's it. That was the rule. That was the work. I made the quilts. She made the shapes, and then I quilted it all together. So it's this really great idea of making joy objects. The point being, when you engaged with it, and that's one of my big soapboxes with quilts, is that they are sculpture and nostalgia objects. And I tie into a lot of Zach's work in terms of where the fabric comes from, and also where the quilt goes. Can it go on a bed? I think yes. Can it be engaged with? I think yes. But of course, it depends on the object. It depends on sort of the longevity of it. The more use it gets, the more use it gets. And that's, a whole different conversation that, whatever we can certainly have later. But the idea with this series was specifically that. Let's put it in the world, like literally physically put these objects in the world. To create some joy. So we made 10 quilts. And then, well, look, I'll tell you the whole story. Nicole loves Las Vegas. And I say, I don't have any desire ever to go to Las Vegas. And so she says, if we go to Las Vegas, I will help you take photos of them in a beautiful place. And I'm like, can't we do it in our yard? But anyway, she won. And, it was really fun. So we decided to do this road trip with these 10 quilts around the country. And so we did this trip to this abandoned water park just outside between Vegas and LA called Rockahula, which is just a wonderful weird zone, and you'll see some pictures of it in a minute. But the idea being to take some of these quilts and kind of put them into the world, and so therefore kind of Velveteen Rabbit style prove that they're real, because they exist in space and not just a hermetically sealed white image of the quilt. It's actually existing in environment. And by golly, some of those should be videos. Maybe they'll play. There we go. And so just taking these objects through the world, right? Literally piling them into the car, driving across, 2,000 miles, the breadth of the country, and taking them out and putting them in environments and photographing them and videoing them and proving their sculpture-ness, but also kind of, giving them a history and a story and a joy. I think it's just such a wonderful conversation, and it certainly speaks to that soft bulk. I think really where all of this whole thing came from was Zach talking about some quilts in the world and kind of how to engage and how to show and what that means. So this whole series is about that conversation about objects in space with intentionality. And this was a year ago when there was also wildfires in the middle of the country. So you can see that kind of strange haziness in the same space. I thought that video was a little longer, but anyway, just kind of holding that really nice environment of space, and as it flows in the wind, I think it lets you see even more the objectness of the quilt and some of the engagement and joy and fun and sort of playfulness in the making and showing and sharing and putting kind of into space. And what does that mean for it to really just exist in some of these environments? including some of the hotel rooms. There's the weirdest hotel. So Motel 6 has this room. This is in Greenville, Green something. Oh my goodness, Green something, Utah. Oh, we try to go there every time, and here I am forgetting the name. But it's got this heart-shaped tub in the middle of the honeymoon suite of this like Motel 6. And so Nicole and I request it every time because we think it's the silliest thing. We've yet to use the bathtub because it's carpeted all the way up to it, and jacuzzis in a public space are just outside of our comfort level. But we love to use to like rent the room and take pictures of it because it's just so silly. But anyway, so that's a little you know, entry point into our minds of things we love. Jacuzzi tubs that are heart-shaped, which are fully carpeted, that we don't use. And there's a couple more pictures of some of these joy quilts. Oh, I thought there was another picture of it in that space. But either way, you get a good sense of the objects and some of the conversation about kind of the objectness of taking these quilts into environments. I'll pop that one back up for a second, and just kind of talking about, you know, atmosphere and wind and kind of engagement with environment. In this case, there's the artwork in the background you can see is called 7 Magic Mountains, and it's outside of Las Vegas. And it's this really strange art piece, which are these neon painted boulders that have been stacked. And it's well worth a visit if you happen to be 45 minutes south of Vegas. But it's not on the way to anything, which I think is one of the reasons we like it so much. But it definitely falls into a conversation with this object, the quilt in this case, you know, and these kind of splotches of color and how it exists in space and how it's obviously very different. And sort of as far different as it can be from boulders stacked. It's a big old billowy quilt that keeps you warm versus a bunch of neon colored rocks that look like they're going to fall on you. But I think it creates a really interesting conversation.
Luke, I got a question for you I want to know about.
Yeah, go for it.
So you said you made 10 of these.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I was up late one night, couldn't sleep, checking out people's websites. And I saw that you had some of these for sale, which makes me wonder, did you keep any of the 10 for yourself? Did one turn out like so something to you that you wanted to hold on to it?
So, I mean, that's a bigger conversation as a lot of makers go, which is, you know, do you ever love something so much you can't get rid of it? And for me, it comes down to, did I make it with the intention to keep it? And I made these with the intention of getting them out in the world. Also, I know how to make more, right? I mean, in the sense that, like, you know, any one that I love so much, it influenced the next things that I made, right? And my goal is to be better every time. So if I keep anything because I think it's the best one, then that means I don't think I can make something better. And so my goal as a maker is to get rid of everything possible and put it in the best home possible and have everyone love it, because then it forces me to make something better. And I'm not always successful, of course. Like, certainly there's, you know, dry periods, shall we say, or, you know, sort of slumps in skill set as I build them. But the intention was to get them all out in the world. And so, no, I didn't make any for me. We did use a bunch of them over time. On the bed, and, you know, certainly as we traveled around the country for this project and other projects. But I don't know, it's sort of a long-winded way to answer your question, that it is actually my goal not to keep anything, if that makes sense.
I dig it. Well, you almost sold me one that night. I was like, let me fall asleep and I'll buy it in the morning.
Hey, look, I might still have one. Let's talk. But anyway, well, thanks, guys. And if there's any questions, you know, we'll all be here for a Q&A in just a little bit. But I'm excited to hear from Latifah, so I'm going to just close my little mouth and let's hear from the VIP.
So I want to say, first of all, thank you for having me. When Luke first reached out, he says, we thought you were fun, so we wanted to invite you. And I'm like, wait a minute, let me reevaluate my interaction with Luke if he had this perception that I was fun. But no. So yeah, I love the opportunity anytime to get on and talk about what brings me joy. And I've been completely inspired by everyone, because when you hear other quilters talk, I think the great thing that we see are the connections, right? And there's been so many connections between each of your presentations, and that have been inspiring to me. So thank you. So this has been, and everyone knows, this has been a really, really, really interesting year and a half plus. It seems like so much longer for all of us. And one of the first things that I started to do during the whole process of it was to create for creation's sake, which I had gotten away from. When you do this as a business, it's always like, what quilt pattern do I have to get finished? What example do I need to create? What, like, you know, what's the deadline? You know, we get focused on doing that because that's what pays our bills and does all of that. But I started to like have these really weird and strange ideas about creating log cabin quilts based on color combinations from Superstar, Adidas Superstar tennis shoes, and really random concepts like these that I just like, you know what? That sounds fun. Let's go for it. And it was all about, I think if 2020 didn't teach us anything else, it was all about finding those moments of joy. And finding those like in the midst of like the world falling apart around us, where can we find that solace and where can we find that peace? So in the midst of all of that, there were a lot of other things going on in the world as well. And I had the opportunity really early on to, I saw one of the posts that the Social Justice Sewing Academy posted in their Remembrance Quilts project about a guy that was killed by the San Leandro Police Department by the name of Stephen Taylor. And for a long time, I've been wanting to do a project like this, but it's a very emotionally intensive project. But for some reason, I heard the story and I knew that this was the project that I was supposed to take on. So I contacted Sarah and told her, like, this is me. I need this, you know, hand it over. She sent me the box of the clothes that they gathered from his grandmother. Basically, long story short, he was having a mental health episode inside of a Walmart in San Leandro. And literally within 30 seconds of the police arriving, he was shot and killed. And he didn't have a weapon. I mean, his weapon was a bat, and he was literally having a mental health breakdown. And his grandmother who raised him was my contact in the whole thing. So it started off as making one memory quilt for the family. And the memory quilt that I made, I was just looking to see if I can find pictures. We did a photo shoot, and a lot of them will be featured. I should have done the fancy slideshow. I have Keynote too, Zach, by the way. But I should have done a slideshow like Luke did. But I'll try to show the picture on my phone. But I wound up making a double wedding ring style quilt, which ended up being my put a ring on it pattern, was our main quilt that we did for the family. And this was gifted to his grandmother, Addie, who raised him. And then I found out he had 2 sons and who lived in 2 different homes. And so I'm like, we have to make quilts for the boys too. So one quilt became 3 quilts. So I did a muffin tops quilt for one of the boys and a glam clam for the others. And I wanted to do something really unique and different, but it was such an emotionally intensive. Have you ever pulled clothes out of a box from someone who was murdered by the cops? I mean, this is like intense emotion. And I know how I am emotionally how I am and how I relate to things. And so my focus in this whole process was to focus on love. That was and this was an act of love for the family. We were showing Stephen love in ways in which, if you hear his life story, he struggled with the mental illness and things his whole life. And it's so, I mean, it was a really about showing love through this whole process. So that was my focus. Like every time I picked up everything, I was infusing everything with just with love, love, love. And it ended up being this really cathartic, peaceful, beautiful experience for me because I was in conversation with Stephen the whole time. So after I got finished with the obligation quilts, which one ended up being 3, I had all of these denim, this denim left over with the rips in them, you know, because that's the current style and you buy clothes like that. And I didn't include these in a lot of the other quilts because they were long armed and I didn't want to send them off to the long armers and have it be complicated. So I started looking at these pieces of denim and like, they felt sacred. So I did not want to throw them away. And I knew that another quilt was going to come out of it. So this is one of the current projects that I'm working on. And I'll try to show us as easily as I can on the camera. But I thought about the denim, the rips in the denim reminded me of knuckles. And so I'll try to show as much of this as I can. And so these are Stephen's clothes. And this has been an interesting process for me. So I don't know if you guys could see it, but it comes out to like a fit. Yeah. So it's been an interesting process to me. So I've been really anchored in, like, for some reason, and I keep saying that log cabins were the bread making for the quilter during the pandemic. And it's like we all go back to this sort of back to basics. What are our foundations when we in times of struggle? So the background is white on white fabric built from a log cabin. And the main base of the fist is also built on a log cabin.
Latifah, what if I screen share the photo that you posted of it on Instagram?
You can totally do that.
Okay.
You can totally do that. Perfect. And if you notice, and so I had a lot of ideas about how I know, so that the log cabin in the middle of the fist is actually centered with the log cabin in the background. But everything's raw edged applique. I use this really heavy red thread to applique it down. It's raw edge applique because red is Stephen's favorite color, and it's this color that represents love and power. And I really wanted to anchor everything in that as well. And then I wanted to do some really intricate, quilting on the back. And then of course, Sarah calls me and it's like, we have this event and we need to quilt faster. So I literally stayed at middle, super late nights, doing some ruler work quilting on the background, which I've never done before. So this has been a really, and I'm still not finishing. I'm like, Sarah, you have to send it back to me because I need to add some quilting on the fist part. So she just sent it back, and I'm actually working on finishing quilting that. So it's been, this experience for me that's been it was super intense. Like I feel like I'm in Stephen's part of me now, and because he is, right? So he's part of this bigger, larger human family, and it's a human extension. But by the same token, I also developed a relationship with Stephen's grandmother as well. So I can pick up the phone and call her and talk to her about as she sort of travels through her experience with dealing with this. So that's been one of my, and I'm working on, I have an exhibit with the Modern Quilt Guild, and a special exhibit that goes along with my keynote for the Modern Quilt Guild's show QuiltCon in Phoenix that was supposed to happen this year. And now it's been put off to Phoenix for next year. So this is one quilt that I'm finishing for that. And I have a whole stack and series of other quilts that I'm finishing. I'm going to share one other quilt with you, which I don't think yes, go ahead.
Do you mind if I interrupt for just a second?
Please do.
Because I've made a number of memory quilts, and I've talked to people, of course, who have made memory quilts. And even when someone passes away of, we'll say, natural causes of illness, it's still very, like the clothing is still charged. The clothing still has some of that life force. And it can be a difficult project to work through for the person making the quilt.
Yes.
So what was your, if it's not too much, like what was your emotional experience going through this? And how did you keep yourself level and balanced? How did you self-care through all of this?
This is my first memory quilt process, and it may be my only. I'm very like hyper emotional with things, to the point where I can walk in the room and tap into everyone's emotions in the room. And I have to, a lot of times, intentionally protect myself so I don't absorb other people's stuff. So when I first got the box, I knew what my experience would be in opening it. So I set aside time where I was mentally prepared enough to even open the box. So it did not get open right away. And I wanted it to not be a painful and sad experience. So I set the intention to be anchored in love every time that I touched anything to do with this process and every time I thought about it. It was an intentional, because I knew that that's what would carry me through. There were sad moments, and it sounds really strange, and I told his grandmother this as well, but I was in conversation with him, with Stephen the whole time. And it's not even on any, like, everyone has different ideas and belief about people passing and, you know, how their spirit lives. And it wasn't even about that. It was literally, Stephen, we're going to show you love through this quilt in a way that this world in many ways didn't. It was, Stephen, we're going to create this piece of memory for, I'm going to cry now, for your son. So hopefully, and they will relate. That's the thing about memory quilts, is you don't know how the recipient's going to relate to it. I was making this for his two sons who are preteens right now. And I knew that they may receive that quilt and not even being able to relate to it at that point. But I wanted to infuse as much love in it so that when they were able to pick it up and deal with it at some point, they knew that someone cared enough about their experience and their dad's experience. That's what came through the quilt. And so that was my focus. That was the energy that I put into it. That was the intention that I interacted with that whole project on. And I feel at the end, what came out was I have another grandmother now, because Addie is now part of my family and my extension of my family. I've never met the sons, but hope to one day meet them. And I know their story and I've seen their pictures and, you know, all of that. And it was all about anchoring in love. And I did not have any guidance in doing that. I just knew that that's what I had to do in going into that project. I also know that I can emotionally be sucked in, and I didn't want to be sucked into sadness and anger and a lot of other things that can be anchored in these experiences, right? Because it's not a happy experience, no matter what side that you look at it from. And, you know, it's actively in the courts now and it's all this other stuff. So my focus was on showing expressions of love through all of the pain. And these kind of situations, I mean, we've all experienced loss, right? But in experiences of loss, there's always this sort of dichotomy of like extreme pain and extreme beauty very often in these same experiences, right? And so I wanted this part, the quilts and the memory quilts and all of that, I wanted it to definitely be anchored in that. So
that's incredible.
Exactly. Crying.
That really resonates. I think that's smart emotional advice that I want to remember next time I'm working on a project.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, it's most because being a super hyper, and I think a lot of people who do this kind of work are, but being hyper emotional, it's so important for me to go and think to things intentionally before I start projects at all. So the next quote I'm going to show, I don't know, I'm not looking at time. Do I need to look at time? What is my time?
Nope, you're doing great.
I shared this one last. Okay. So
all the time you need.
The next quote that I'm going to share is not as emotionally charged, but I think it's a fun quote that we all can relate to. So many years ago, I was invited to take a class with Sherilyn Wood when she taught with maybe it was a guild out of Orange County. And we went down to sewing party and I took the class. It was a 2-day class. It's what she called her mod mood class at the time. So you come into class. I don't know if you guys taken the class with Sherilyn Wood, but she has you meditate at the front. Not everyone can relate to this, right? But I learned to be a student when I'm in. It's hard for teachers to do that, but I learned to be a student and to submit to the process. So we go in this class. It's improv, and you guys have seen Sherry's work. It's like super amazing and organic, and it flows. And my work happens to be a lot more structured. My mind loves order. So I'm like, I'm going to go into this class and I'm going to have a Sherilyn Wood quilt when we come out. So go into the classroom, and what she has you do is cut these like freehand wedges with like a rotary cutter and just whatever fabric that your mood right there. You tap into your mood and pull a fabric. And so I did this and cut all my wedges and sewed them together. At the end of day 1, you start to look at all your wedges. My wedges formed perfect freaking circles. I was so upset We didn't use one ruler. I was so upset. There was tears involved and not the happy kind. I was like, you know what? I wanted my Sherry Lynn Wood quilt at the end of this class. And I had to go home and talk to myself because I'm like, you know what? The beauty of this is like my voice shines through really, really, really strong. So I went home and I decided to, you know what? I'm going to take a deep dive into who I really am. So I took those perfectly formed curves and I pieced them into a rectangular grid background. I actually pieced them in, they're not applique. And I started quilting them. The quilting sucked and it sat for many years. I just took all the quilting out so I can re-quilt it. So I'm gonna try to step back as far as I can in my little tiny space here to show you guys my perfect curves here. So you'll start to see some of them here.
Oh yeah. And that's all Sherry Linwood ruler free.
All of the colored pieces are. Let me just show the bottom.
Oh my God. That's so beautiful.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm super excited. So I'm going to do some ruler quilting on it now because that's like my new thing that I picked up during pandemic is to do ruler quilting. And then I may accent it with some hand quilting as well, which I don't do a lot of at all because I sadly don't enjoy the process. I don't, my dirty secret is I don't enjoy sewing at all. And a lot of people don't understand it, but it's a means, sewing is a means for me to get it out of here and into the world. Mm-hmm. And so I only do certain things when the quilt tells me to. And I think this quilt is calling for some really fun ruler quilting, maybe some straight line quilting with my walking foot, and then some addition of some hand quilting. So I'm just really trying to focus on the things that I love now. I'm also trying to clear clutter out. So I was just telling the crew here that I started making a list of my UFOs and I'm currently at 50 and I stopped. And these are this is from quilts that have been started to like stacks of fabric that are quilts planned. You know, it's from a few neat bindings on them. And someone asked what ruler quilting is. It's quilting on, I'm doing it on my domestic quilt, on my domestic machine, but you have a ruler foot and you actually use quilting, they're thicker rulers than templates that you cut with and use them as guides for free motion quilting. So that's ruler work on your machine. And rulers have been used for years on long arms, but currently they are being, a lot more people are starting to use them on domestic machines as well. And a lot more machines are being set up to where you can do ruler quilting easily on it. So yeah, so it's sort of been, you know, I'm in the process of doing some really ridiculous things in my business, which is sort of fun. So it's all about following joy again, right? So I'm in the middle of developing these. My largest clammy is a 12-inch clammy. So I'm in the process of doing this special edition 16 and 24-inch clammies that I'm so freaking excited about. It's special edition, short run. So if you're interested, get on my mailing list. But this is sort of that ridiculous thing, you know, like, you know what, whoever's gonna love it. And some people are gonna be like, seriously, Latifah? And that's perfectly fine too, right? Someone's gonna find their jam. So that's sort of been my last, you know, few months is just really anchoring in the things that bring me joy, trying to focus on the thing, you know, like I'm creating things based in that. Like it's been, because I think that's what's going to get us all through, you know, that's what's going to get us. It's like our world has been shaken up. And for so many reasons in so many ways, the world's getting shut back down again for a lot of people. You know, and we, you know, looking at Zach's, I was laughing because I'm like, isn't it August? Looking at Zach's, but I get it, right? I mean, literally, I think I talked to my guy just a couple of days ago. I'm like, how is it August? Like, how is it even August right now? Like, time is really, you know, it's really, so, you know, that's where I am right now, and I'm taking a deep dive into it. I have some of my really crazy, huge log cabin quilts that I sketched out based on Superstar, Adidas Superstar sneakers. I have some of them like halfway done. It's on my list of my to-do list. I mean, my whips list as well. But, you know, it's all about finding that joy. It's all about And also about challenging ourselves and not being afraid to step outside. So when Sarah emailed me and said she needed the fist quilt for a shoot that they were doing, the video shoot that they were doing, this is the very first time I've done ruler quilting. And my first instinct was to practice and do another quilt first, because this is actually eventually will be gifted to Addie, who's Stephen's grandmother. And I was like, you know what? I was in that pressure situation where I needed to get it finished. I'm like, let's just go for it. And the beauty is there's tons of imperfection in it, like tons, because I was learning and doing that quilt, but it's so perfect. And it's with the imperfections, and it's turned out such a beautiful, beautiful, powerful quilt. And I think that it's even more powerful that I didn't wait, till I was perfect at it before I actually took a deep dive into doing it. And so, which I love about that as well. So.
Oh, thank you for both of those stories, Latifah. That reminds me of the first quilt that I ever made. I was basically making a blanket for my house, and I was trying to make a G's Bend inspired quilt. And I thought, I have all this fabric I inherited from my neighbor. I'm going to just rip it up and sew a quilt. And I didn't have any special quilting tools. So I was mostly just snip and ripping. And so I ended up with the world's most 90-degree angled, straight lined G's and Bend inspired quilt ever. It was just so square. And you ending up with your perfect circles reminds me of that. But I kept at it, and I got quilts that are curvier. And, if you want to make a Sherry Linwood, I'm sure you'll be able to.
You know what? I think now.
Not that you need, exactly like
no, I get that. I just went into it. I try to go into experiences without having expectations.
Yeah.
But I'm taking a Sherry Linwood class, so I need me a Sherry Linwood quilt.
Totally.
But I think the thing that I learned from that experience is that, one, to really appreciate that I am really, really well anchored in my identity as a quilter.
Mm-hmm.
And so once I got that, and it was literally like that night, that's when I decided, you know what, we're going to dive all in. And I put these improv shapes into this really grid, regular background, and I love the juxtaposition of the two.
Amazing.
Because I think that was the recognition of, this is who you are as a quilter, and and I'm perfectly fine. I love that.
Yeah.
I can do really crazy improv, but it probably stretches me the most. And I've been thinking that I need to do a little bit of that as well, because we do need to kind of push our brains in different directions so that we can stretch our abilities and our minds, and it gives us other ideas to how to do the things that we do, better as well. So, but it was a fun experience. I was upset at the end of the first night.
Sometimes it takes a while to incorporate new lessons and new approaches.
Yeah, absolutely. Also such a great reminder of, you're always still yourself. You're always still making a Heidi Parks or a Latifah.
You can't run from yourself.
Yeah.
I've learned that.
Luke?
Oh yeah. There's a number.
I can't run from me at all. I'm right here.
I would like, if y'all don't mind, to take this time to transition semi-officially to our Q&A session. If anybody out there has questions for any of the four of us, especially for our guest star Latifah, feel free to type them in the chat, and we'll read them out and we'll chat about them. I do know that, Heidi, there was a question earlier on during your portion about your upcoming Quilt Along. Could you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'd love to quickly share about that. I have it's my third ever quilt pattern. This one is called the Vignettes quilt, and it's a style of piecing where you make quilt blocks, but they're not all the same size as each other. So they can be long and skinny. They can be like not 90-degree angles, but you make all these little bits of piecing. You put them in a pile, and then later you figure out how to sew them to each other. So that's the approach to piecing. And then the other side of the quilt, the concept, is about art vocabulary and hopefully empowering quilters to feel more familiar and comfortable with art world words. And We go through the elements of art, like texture, shape, line, form, and then we go through the postmodern principles of art. So things like appropriation, juxtaposition, recontextualization, representation, gazing, layering, phrases that are a little bit more challenging, more connected to the conceptual art world even. And for all of those, we make one quilt block, one vignette for each element of art and each postmodern principle. And then we use the principles of art, like focal point, emphasis, movement, rhythm, pattern. We use those to figure out how we're going to compose the quilt and how we'll sew it together. And the Quilt Along is going to be using that pattern, and it's going to last, I'm following the moon again. So from full moon, from the harvest moon to the hunter's moon, starting on September 20th, we will have a prompt every day to share on Instagram. Because so much of it's about language, there are also prompts that are an important part of the Quilt Along for comments that you should make on the posts from other people participating in the Quilt Along. So like, comment using a principle of art in your comment. And so hopefully it'll create lots of community where we'll be really having conversations with the other people in the Quilt Along, rather than just sending our post out into the abyss, but with a lot of prompts that are on how do we communicate and develop our vocabulary skills. And there will be 4 free Zoom gatherings just like this, where people in the Quilt Along will get together to talk. And you just have to buy the pattern. Everything else is free to participate. And there's nowhere you have to register online. Like, you just start showing up to stuff and using the hashtag. And all those details are on my most recent email newsletter, which is linked in my profile on Instagram. So even if you didn't get the newsletter in the moment, it's right there for you to access still.
And could we could also put that link in our follow-up email to this softball
Oh,
conversation.
totally. That's a great idea. We will do that. Yeah. Okay. So
Heidi, I got a second question for you. So Mickey would like to know about your most recent quilt. How are you defining the difference between the style of that quilt and improv piecing? What's the difference in your mind?
Okay. So there's a big umbrella of improv piecing. And I would say in the quilting world, there's quilts. And then a lot of times we divide into precision piecing and improv piecing. So within the improv piecing world, there are a lot of ways to do it. One way would be like a score from Sherry Linwood, and she has these approaches to doing an improv quilt. Quilts like the scavenger hunt quilt pattern that I did and the quilt that I made that was supposed to be for France, like that is one piece of white fabric that's a background, and then I did free-form applique onto the surface. So that would be another way of doing improv quilting, is free-form applique. Another way would be like the quilt behind Zach is an improv patchwork, where you sew up pieces and you sew them together. And that, I would say, is also falling probably into the category of what I would describe as a vignette approach to piecing, because you make lots of little blocks and then you sew them to each other. But it's not with that regularity of each block is 10 inches by 10 inches. They can be a variety of ways. And so I know for myself, I tend to like lately sewing on the floor. Zach has his design wall that he uses, but you'll sew a little bit and you'll stick it on the wall or the floor. And then you'll sew another little bit and you'll stick it there and kind of compose it. And then figure out, how am I going to sew all of this together? Maybe yet another way would be a strip quilt, like an improv strip quilt. So you're making all these strips and then you sew the strips together. And that, because of that regularity of being a strip quilt, I would say has its own little subcategory of different ways to improv piece. Yeah, excellent. Thanks.
It's a big quilty world, isn't it?
Yeah, there's so many ways to do it.
Luke, I have a question for you, and it goes back to your collaborations with Nicole. So what what new thing did you experience with that collaboration that's worked its way into your work, or that you would like to incorporate more into your work moving forward?
I mean, that's a great question, and sort of to Latifah's point earlier, as far as, you know, where learning comes from. You know, you get a lot from working with other people, or, you know, specifically their fabric, or specifically for someone, you know, a gift or you know, so from collaboration through gift, you know, or some memory quilt. There's a lot of inspiration, and so yeah, sometimes it's hard to define kind of where it's going to push you, you know, in the sense that it's hard to be like, well, I've never used a zigzag before, but now I'm going to use a zigzag. Just sometimes it's just kind of this like slight shift in your ethos in a way. Like, I think for me, it's a bit of a freedom. Nicole doesn't GAF about how she puts quilt together. She will glue it. She'll leave the fabric on the fusible just so it crinkles. She will use tassels and reflective stuff. She just, you know, and it works so well for her, and it's worked for her for years. And I'm just so, you know, kind of like Latifah, I probably would accidentally end up with perfect circles too. You know, and just that I will have overthought before I start even the process. And Nicole is just someone who just cuts and glues, and then if it works, great. If it doesn't, she'll fix it, you know. And so for me, I think that from that specific project, I will have taken some of that freedom of expression, and also just the freedom of self-permission, right? If I do it wrong, maybe that gives someone, you know, there's that kind of saying in some native cultures, like you always leave a place that God can get in. So there's always at least one place that's wrong. Even if you're a meticulous maker, there's one stitch that's missing, or a corner that's not right. It's a, you know, you leave a place that God can enter. And so I think that there's something really beautiful about that, you know, that you can kind of discover in people's work. And so, you know, as a very over attentive architect brained person, it was fun to work with some, well, not fun every time, admittedly. I was like, how you can do that? You can't just glue it down. What are you doing? You know, but certainly, you know, learning to leave even more places for God to get in is kind of something I will probably take away from that. But I mean, I'm a big fan of collaborative work. I learn every time. Sometimes I don't finish that fast. Heidi Parks knows, but you know, top of the shelf. Anyway, but there's always things to be learned from other people's skill sets, as well as things that you might not think are other people's skill sets. Like, for example, you know, Nicole, she's just so slapdash. I'm like, well, you should learn to be more meticulous. But actually, I think there's a beauty in doing just the thing you want. I'm going to make a shape and I'm going to put it on a quilt. Whereas I'm going to micromanage a shape and tell it how to be, and then how to put it in a quilt. I think there's a beauty in learning other people's skill sets. And again, whether you think it's a skill set or not, you know, there's a lot to be learned. So, so I don't know. Who knows, right? I mean, who knows what it'll be down the line? But I think just allowing more room, and in that kind of, you know, that same sort of sentiment of other cultures, like a more room for God to enter, you know, and that would sort of manifest in sort of my language as more room for the viewer, user, buyer, collector to find language, you know, where points don't match, and that kind of a thing.
I think that's a fine answer.
Yeah.
Y'all got anything you're wondering about?
Any other questions for the chat?
No, chat's all answered up.
Oh, well, we're right at our 90 minutes. That's pretty impressive.
Hey, when you're good, you're good.
And I've always got more questions for Latifah. You know, Zach, I've got some more questions. You know, it's kind of talking about some of those memorial and kind of honoring quilts. There's a lot more stories there. So, you know, I guess I encourage everyone to ask them, maybe, you know, on Instagram, or follow up with any of us. But, you know, there's just a lot more to be said about the emotions implicit in material itself, and the act of making as a homage to the gift receiver, as well as the, you know, deceased, past process, you know, some sort of combination. You get a triangle in a way that's that's very unusual and beautiful. So there's just a lot to that. So I encourage everyone to kind of put it in your brain and maybe ask into the future.
Mhm.
Latifah, any parting words?
No, I think my parting words to quilters are always to learn to take a deep dive into trusting who you are as a maker, to give yourself the freedom to just create for creation's sake without being tied to what the result is going to be, and to anchor yourself in the experience more than the result and the outcome. And I think that's where the room for the growth is and for beauty to really come out and bloom. So I want to thank the three of you for inviting me to be on today. It was a fun experience, and thanks for everyone for joining us as well and for all the insightful questions.
Latifah, it was a pleasure having you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And with that, we'll say, see you next time, folks.
Bye, everyone.
Yeah, thank
Take
you,
care.
everyone. And we'll be sharing the recording on YouTube. So if you're joining us online, please add to the comments. You can keep the conversation going there. We try to check in and see what's happening. And yeah, thank you guys for being here. So beautiful seeing all of you comment, thanking. So have a wonderful evening.
Everybody. And if the four of us would stick around for just a moment, we'll talk privately about next steps.
Oh yeah, good call.
Yep.
Mhm.
Bye.
Bye.